Hey YouTube, what's going on? This is PokeTCG Gamer here, and I'm back with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over my NPL Season 8 draft analysis video. So, as most of you guys probably know, the NPL had a draft stream for Majors this past weekend. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. It is uploaded onto the NPL's channel, which will obviously be linked in the description. So yeah, basically I'm still in Majors, obviously, and as you can see by the title and the graphic in front of you, I am still the Gotham City Golurks. So a few things I want to go over before I get into the mods I drafted. So before the draft began, we had an order made, and from that order we basically picked what spot we picked in the draft. And I had the seventh pick in that order, and by the time I got to pick my spot, picks 1 through 6 were gone. And honestly, I did kind of want a closer to the top pick, just because there was a few mons I was eyeing that I knew would go pretty high. And once I saw I couldn't get that, I basically said, okay, I don't really want to pick close to the middle. I'm just gonna grab this wheel pick at 16, as no one's got that yet. So obviously all my picks are gonna be back to back. And I'll be picking last in the first round, obviously. So another thing to mention is that we have a total of 120 points to spend between up to 12 Pokemon, and I think a minimum of 9 was the minimum that we could pick. And we also have 24 points to use on Z Crystal Pokemon. So for example, let's say I don't know, let's say I draft Kieran Black, which is I think 17 points. That is 17 points out of my Z Crystal points. So now I only have 7 left to use on maybe 1 or even 2 more Z Crystal users if I wanted to. And I think that's pretty much it for some stuff you guys need to know. So I think we can get into the draft analysis. So with my first pick, obviously, like I said, picking at 16, the last pick in the first round, a lot of stuff was gone, but there's still a lot of good stuff left. I had the chance to take things like Kieran Black, Blacephalon, and Zapdos, just to name a few. But I ended up going with a mon that I've always wanted to get, just because of its threat, the threat it provides in weather. It gives me an early rocker, and it gives me probably, I'd say, the best spinner in the format, and that is Excadrill. So Excadrill, obviously I don't have sand with it yet. I'm going to try to get a sand setter later, hopefully, in the draft. But even without sand, I still really like this Pokemon, as like I said, provides me Stealth Rocks, provides me Rapid Spin, gives me a Volt blocker right off the bat. So like a great pivot to electric types. With its steel typing, also a great pivot to most fairy types. Obviously not something like a Azumarill, but for example, I can pivot into things like bulky wish fairies like Sylveon or Forges. And I could potentially get rocks or rapid spin on them. Depends on the situation, obviously. But and even outside of its sand related abilities, it has an ability in Mold Breaker, which lets Earthquake hit Levitate Mons, for example, or lets it Swords Dance on an Unaware Mon and just hit right through it, for example. So basically, I do want sand with this Pokemon, obviously. It's obviously better with sand. But even if I don't get sand, there's ways that I can utilize this Pokemon without any sand. So the next Pokemon that I'm getting is, I want to get a really fast Pokemon right off the bat. Sometimes I end up getting like a lower tier, or a just not as good of a, like, I get a speedy mon, but it's just not something that I'm gonna bring a lot. And I want to make sure my fastest thing on my team is something that I can basically bring every week if I wanted to. And this mon is Weavile. So Weavile, I could have went with other things, obviously. Here I could have went with something like Kieran Black, Zapdos, Blacephalon. Obviously all the same things were on the board, but Weavile gives me a lot of things. And one, obviously, it gives me that great speed at base 125. 383 is what it maxes out at. Obviously it has things like Pursuit. It can Pursuit Trap like bulky, or not even bulky, just Pursuit Trap any Psychic or Ghost type. It can hit super hard with a Band. Band and Knockoff and Ice Crash is not something a lot of things want to take. It gets okay coverage in Low Kick and Poison Jab. as well as being able to abuse natural gift with berries, possibly like maybe natural gift fire for Scizor, if it comes down to that. This mon also gives me priority right off the bat, and priority is something that I value a good amount in Draft League. And obviously the priority is Ice Shard, base 40, pretty good priority for its stab, obviously. So getting this priority and getting this super fast mon to pair with Extra right off the bat is something I really like. So obviously now, being done with these 2 picks, I now have to wait 31 picks until my next selection, which obviously isn't ideal, but it's what I chose with the wheel. So I didn't really even make a draft plan. I was kind of planning as I went. So I looked at the draft board, and there was a few things that I was eyeing, but I wasn't really gonna like plan something out until it was closer to my pick, and I knew what I was gonna be working with. So just looking at Weavile and Excadrill, you see the shared weaknesses that they share. I think fighting and fire are the only 2 ones they share, but they also don't resist a lot combined with each other. So the next Pokemon I wanted to get was something that synergizes well with these 2, but also keeps up the offensive vibe that I'm kind of going with. And that Pokemon is Gyarados. Obviously Gyarados, super threatening Pokemon with Dragon Dance, and just to point out, this is actually my first Z Crystal user, and as you can see, this was 12 points, so now I have 12 points left to use on Z Pokemon. Gyarados, it just paired very well with these 2, I felt. Obviously it has abilities like Intimidate, and so it can switch into like physical, like a physical fighting type using close combat, for example, which both of my first picks were weak to. Also patches up that fire resist. It gives me a fire resist, a ground immunity, and a water resist, which ground and water are 2 types that neither Excadrill or Weavile resisted either. So good to have resistant immunities for those. And like I said, great abilities in Moxie, which can aid a Dragon Dance sweep, or Intimidate, which just allows me to pivot into, say, a close combat. And basically I made this my Z-move user because with Dragon Dance, it's probably going to invite in a defensive wall, and being able to just nuke a defensive wall with, say, Z Waterfall, Z Aqua Tail, Z Bounce, Z Earthquake, some Z move to just blow it away, is something that I do very much like. And it's hard to, like, obviously a lot of Scarfers are going to be fast in this thing at +1, but because of how strong it is, it's just hard to be able to pivot into your Scarfer right away, especially if your Scarfer is like weak to, say, water or something. So yeah, this is my first Z Crystal user and my 3rd pick of the draft. So with the next pick on this wheel, I want to start building a Regenerator core. And there was a lot of Regenerator mons still on the board, and the main reason I wanted to do that is I feel that Regenerator cores, obviously they're going to be defensive for the most part, but they help me keep up an offensive vibe of the team. Like, I'm just going to go into my next pick, and that is Tangrowth. And why I say it keeps up the offensive vibe is, like, Tangrowth is like it's a great Assault Vest user, for example, and because of the coverage it gets, it's able to run a lot of it's able to run like 4 attacks and keep up offensive pressure, versus most things. Obviously it's not going to be like breaking through defensive walls, but because of the coverage it gets, it's not going to be allowing offensive mons, for example, to come in for free, which is nice. Tangrowth obviously gives me a second knockoff user, which is great, getting rid of items like leftovers on defensive Pokemon. Like, it has good synergy with Gyarados, for example, being able to tank electric hits, as well as giving me another water resist and my first grass resist, which is another reason why I got it, as well as things like Zygarde 50% obviously got drafted. And this gives me 1,000 errors resist, which is nice. Because obviously Gyarados resists, it's immune to ground, but it's not immune to 1,000 arrows, so there's that. And like I said before, Tangrowth can run specially defensive sets with Assault Vest, but it can also run physically defensive sets with like Rocky Helmet. And not running Assault Vest allows it to use the threat of Sleep Powder It could also run Leech Seed or just Synthesis, so it doesn't have to use Regenerator to recover health. And like I said, the most important thing is the Regenerator ability. Obviously, this gives me a great pivot, and that's really what I want in my defensive walls. I want to be able to pivot in and maybe pivot back out. That's really what I wanted with this Pokemon, and I think that pretty much wraps up this pick. So with my next selection, obviously once again very far away, but the Mon that I really wanted at one of these spots that I didn't end up going actually fell to me at my next pick, which I was very happy about. So without further ado, I picked Slowbro with my first wheel pick, and obviously pretty obvious what Slowbro does for this team too. Gives me a very nice bulky water, which I very much appreciate in the draft format. Pairs with Tangrowth, give me a nice Regenerator core. And I also want to mention that before this Slowbro pick, my Sandsetter that I wanted in Gigalith got sniped by Cheese. So, and Hippowdon and Tyranitar obviously were already gone. Now I could have went with Mega Tyranitar, but I decided not to, as you guys will see with my next pick. I take my Mega. Even though I don't get Sand right now, there is still one more setter after those four, which you guys might see later on my draft. But either way, let's talk about Slowbro a little bit more. Fantastic pick for this draft. Like I said, Regen Core already formed with Slowbro and Tangrowth. It can run Calm Mindset as a win con. It could even run Assault Vest just because of its, once again, amazing coverage. Gets Dragon Tail, or no, it does not get Dragon Tail. That is Slow King, but it gets like Fire Blast, Ice Beam, obviously Water Stab, Psychic Stab. Can run Thunder Wave, obviously Toxic, and Assault Vest. Like I said, just a great pivot into, for example, like I don't know, what's a really like Starmie, for example, I guess. Even though like Thunderbolt's gonna hit me really hard, like Assault Vest allows me to pivot into a water move and maybe pivot back out. So there's that. This also gives me a Trick Room option if I want to go that route later in the draft. So I think that pretty much wraps up this pick. So pretty much looking at these five, I want to take my Mega right now. Like, I didn't really need to take it just because a lot of the teams had a Mega already, but I just wanted to get it on my team right now because there was nothing on the board that just screamed to me, okay, take this right now. So I ended up going with my Mega, and as you can see, a few typings I'm lacking right now are Dragon and Fairy. I also don't have a Cleric on my team, which Slowbro and Tangrowth very much appreciate a good Cleric. And that is why I went with Mega Altaria. So Mega Altaria, obviously with my next wheel pick, great Pokemon I felt that paired with my team, gave me that Dragon type, gave me that Fairy type, basically gave me that Dragon immunity once I Mega Evolve, which is obviously important to note that I have to Mega Evolve to get that Dragon immunity. And like I said, it gives me a Cleric, which I very much want with Slowbro or Tangrowth, because I feel like a lot of mons are going to be packing Toxic for those two. So just having that healable support is very nice. And I wanted my healable user not to be just some like cheap 5-point option, for example, at the end of the draft. I wanted it to be something similar to Weavile that I could bring almost every week and have it fit onto my team. Yeah, this also gets a lot of setup options in Dragon Dance, Cotton Guard, or Agility. And lastly, this gives me a second hazard removal option with Defog. So there's that. So now onto my next wheel selection. Basically at this point in the draft, I was basically looking to add a few things. I wanted to add some more hazard setters, whether it be, obviously I only have one rocker at this point. I wanted to try and get some spike users, some toxic spike users. Also wanted to get a probably want to get one more hazard removal option down the line. But with my next pick, I wanted to get a second flying resist, and I want to try to get more priority. And this mon, at the same time, while doing both those things, also helped me fix my speed tiers a little bit. Because right now my speed tier is Weavile to Excadrill, which is not very good. So in the middle of those two speed tiers, we have Lycanroc Dusk form. So Lycanroc this form, like I said, gives me a second Stealth Rock setter, as well as priority user with a Cell Rock. And like I said, the second Flying Resist is something I wanted, and even though both my Flying Resist are pretty offensive, I'm really okay with that, as a Cell Rock can also hit Flying types before they get to hit me. This is very speedy, base 110, helps me with my current speed gap, like I said. This is also my second and final Z Crystal user, as I did not end up getting another Mon that was within 2 points that I want to make my Z Crystal user. And this Mon gets its signature Z move, actually, Splintering Storm Shards, which is an 190 base power rock move. So basically, and it also gets Swords Dance, so at +2, that Z move is gonna blow away a defensive wall if it's not, unless it resists. Even if it resists, it's gonna do a lot of damage. And the Z move also gets rid of terrain, which might come into effect, probably not though. And also its ability that got Tough Claws makes a lot of its moves very, very nice. For example, Drill Run is now a stronger Earthquake for this thing. It doesn't get Earthquake, so Drill Run is now, I think, base 104 with the Tough Claws boost. So that is very, very nice. And with my second pick, the Wheel, I wanted to get a Ghost type, and this Ghost type, it gave me a good defensive wall, and it actually also gave me T-Spikes, which is something I very, very much liked, and that Pokemon is Cofagrigus. This Mon, like I said, great defensive wall, runs Will-O-Wisp, can also give me Toxic Spikes, which my team doesn't need, but Toxic Spikes is very, very nice in the format. Its ability Mummy can take away the ability of opposing Pokemon, which could help me in certain situations, and it can also give me a Spin Blocker, but in general, it's just a fantastic physical wall that could possibly set up T-Spikes for me. There's not really much else to say about this pick. So for my next selection, I think I was down to 18 points at this point, and I basically knew I wasn't aiming to get 12 at this point. I was basically aiming to get 11 Mons, and at this next wheel pick, this Mon was still here, and I didn't have a fighting type yet. I usually like to get a strong offensive fighting type, and this Mon also gave me a third Mon with priority, and that Mon is Mienshao. So at this point, the board was obviously pretty thin, but I do value Mienshao a lot. It helps me close that speed tier gap again a little bit between Lycanroc and Excadrill at base 105 with Mienshao. Has two great abilities, gives me a third Regenmon, as well as it has Reckless, which powers up its high jump kick, which is super hard to switch into a Reckless high jump kick as long as it hits, obviously. And obviously, like I said, it's a fast fighting type. I do value good offensive fighting types in the format, honestly. And it gives me my first Mon with momentum, actually, with U-turn. And obviously, it's kind of strange only having one Mon with a momentum move, but my team really doesn't need momentum to do what it's supposed to do. So that's pretty much it for Mienshao. Now on to my last two picks. At this point, Mienshao was a pretty hefty price of 11 points, leaving me with 7 points. It basically, no spoiler at this point, honestly, you guys should probably know, I ended up taking a 1-point Hippopotas with my last pick, to just give me a Sand Setter if I wanted it. But with this pick, I was looking at the board and I wanted to get a third hazard removal option that could absorb T-Spikes, and this Mon fit that build perfectly, and that Mon is Skuntank. So this Mon is pretty straightforward, obviously. Gives me a second Dark type that can actually pivot into Psychic and Ghost types and actually Pursuit Trap them, because obviously Weavile isn't the bulkiest thing in the world, and obviously 4 times weak to fighting. Skuntank obviously only has the one weakness in ground, and could possibly Pursuit Trap certain Mons, as well, like I said, the third Defog user and the T-Spikes Absorber, which I really wanted for my draft at this point. And with my last pick, no surprise, we have the 1-point Hippopotas. Not much to say about this pick. This Mon gives me Sand Support and Drill, as well as a third Rock Setter to pair with Excadrill and Lycanroc at this point. And that's really all I have to say about it. So, quick draft summary, I guess, just a few closing notes. Honestly, the one thing I regret about this is all my rockers are either something I'm not going to bring a lot in Hippopotas, or both of them are offensive rockers, and that's something I regret. It's probably something I'm going to end up fixing later in the season, probably get a more defensive rocker somewhere down the line. But either way, I think that's going to conclude my draft analysis. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming NPL season. Week 1 will be up March 4th, so that's this Sunday, so definitely stay tuned for that. And with that said, that's going to be the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and later.